All right, we're here as the Lost Rider Podcast. Good morning and welcome to the second half of this week's news from the camp house. Sitting here with Greg Buenger now. He's one of the state directors for the Farm Bureau. He's been in Washington. He's been in D.C. He's talked to our D.C. Ag Commissioner, Ag Director, Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins, who is probably the most qualified we've seen in a while, and is a Texan. That was one Texan the Trump administration picked up. I was wondering, early on with their administration, there were no Texans in it. Of course, there wasn't too many Texans I was very proud of at the time anyway. But Brooke Rollins is up there doing a good job. And like I said, you get to sit down with them and visit with them, and she pays attention. All right, now, here's the next question. We just had this. All right, you said the border's closed. Now, it's apt to get opened again, but, when it was open before, there's a quarantine period, and the cattle were actually dipped twice. One thing I will say about Mexican cattle is, and this is not really on topic, but I think too many people, when they think of Mexican cattle, they think of Longhorns and Corrientes and a bunch of old trash cattle. And that's not the case. Mexico has beef cattle just like we do. I've guided down there on how many ranches, and, they've got registered beef masters, they've got Black Angus, they've got, Hereford, they've got cattle down there just like we do here. So that's not, you're thinking wrong if you think it's a bunch of trash cattle. But, it's worthy to note that, bringing them across the border is, I don't see them opening it real soon. I mean, and it's, I don't know. I just don't see that. I don't see them doing it during the heat of the year, huh?
Yeah, and I asked Secretary Rollins that point blank, and she said, and this was a couple of months ago when we had this visit with her. I might add as an aside, the groundbreaking for the sterile fly facility down there at in South Texas. We're close to where the mission plant used to be, down at Edwards Air Force Base down there. Not Edwards. The Air Force Base down there. Anyway, the groundbreaking was a couple of weeks ago. Finally, for that new fly facility, and I was able to go down there. One of the other directors and myself, we were invited to go down there. And so I was there for that. But in terms of the border opening, I asked her, and she said, and her words were, I don't have any plans immediately to open the border. But when that time does come, I would expect we would start from the western part. In other words, probably Arizona over that way at those ports. But she did tell me she doesn't have any imminent plans to open the border.
Okay. All right. Well, it's just something to think about. It's just something to pay attention to, because
why don't we talk a little bit about?
Go ahead.
Why don't we talk a little bit about where they are? Because people, I get phone calls all the time. Where are these? Where are they? Where are they? How,
Yes.
And you watch the news and you hear, oh well, there was a case in Florida. There was a case, and when we say there's no screwworms in America yet, it doesn't mean. Those cases that's the one that was in Florida, for instance, which was a horse a month or so ago. It was hauled through one of our stations of entry, our ports of entry over there, and it was caught there, and it had larvae in a wound, and so they cleaned the larvae out of the wound. That's the end of that. Okay. As long as there's no flies involved, it's done. So, but let's talk about where the flies are active and where I talk about it in organic.
Right.
Things are So initially, when we talked last time, most of them, if you guys know where the Yucatan Peninsula sticks out into the Gulf of America, there,
Right.
if you just draw a line westward across about 3 or 4 Mexican countries down there, that's where there's a lot of feedlots, and that's where those worms. That's the hotbed, the previous hotbed from the early days in Mexico until just this last fall or so, and then coming into this year. Now there are active screwworms in Tamaulipas, in Nuevo Leon, and Coahuila, which are the 3 states that are along the Texas border that go from the Gulf inward, and they line up with about 7 counties down there. So right now, the sterile flies that we are able to get, we have 100 million a week coming from Panama. We were using them in that hot area down there, but we control Panama. We control that fly producing plant. In other words, USA does. And so now we have diverted the overwhelming majority of the flies to the southern Texas border and that northern part of Mexico. So it's called a polygon down there. We're 50 miles into Texas, seven counties across there, and 200 miles into Mexico. If you can imagine that in your mind, that's where we're dumping sterile flies now to try to put that fire out right south of the border. So that's where they are now. The last cases have been within 100 miles of the border. They have been. I get reports from the USDA daily. They have been calf navels. They've been wounds in dogs. They've been, just random things. But one will be 60 miles from the border. One will be 75. Just things like that. And I think we're up to close to 30,000 cases that have been in Mexico, and I believe we're somewhere around 1,600 human cases in Mexico right now. So that's kind of the status quo as far as where they are, Armin.
All right. Okay. So you're creating like a buffer zone. You said 50 miles into Texas and 200 miles along. So you're creating a buffer zone with these sterile flies.
That is the plan. We were in the days when you guys, you folks that are our age, you remember those little paper boxes everywhere,
right,
that were dropped out of airplanes. Well, a lot of the flies down there in South Texas, because it's flat and the highways are real organized, they're being blown out of vehicles. They have these apparatus on the back to literally blow flies, blow flies. There you go.
Yeah.
Out of vehicles, and so they're thinking that's a little more efficient and a little more accurate, and so that's what they're doing. So the way this works is the things that are coming up from Panama, they're not shipping flies, they're shipping the pupa, which is the last stage before they become a fly. They're shipping them in these big Tupperware-like containers, and then they're letting them become flies in that processing plant down there in South Texas, and then the flies are being distributed from there.
All right. Okay, now what was the timeline? Explain the timeline historically now with that place in South Texas, because it had to be rejuvenated.
It actually was gone. And so the timeline as far as fly production this time goes, we have 100 million flies a week coming from Panama. A couple of years ago, and the dates, I think it's in 23, a couple of years ago or more, we sent $21 million to Mexico to convert a sterile fruit fly facility. Say that fast 3 times. A sterile fruit fly facility into a sterile screwworm fly facility. That facility is supposed to be online by the end of this summer, and so that will be 100 million more flies a week, and that is Mexico's plant. And so there is cooperative agreement of how those flies will be distributed. The brand new plant that's being built in South Texas, down in the McAllen area down there, Moore Air Force Base is the Air Force Base I couldn't think of a while ago.
Right.
The place I was down there for the groundbreaking a couple of weeks ago. That was supposed to happen longer ago. The original projection on that was we're going to be producing flies out of that in the summer of 27, which is still a long way away. That's now been bumped forward to fall or winter of 27 before we're getting flies. The first phase of that facility will produce 100 million flies a week, and then subsequently it will get up to 300 million flies a week.
All right. Well,
and we're talking, and so we're going to have a lot of flies, but that's the timeline.
Well, I mean, okay, but eventually what we're looking at is right now the only ones really producing flies is the ones down in Panama. And then within the next couple of years, we're going to have 3 places doing it. And, what happens when a year from now, the whole problem's gone, and all of a sudden now we got 3 plants producing these flies?
You're very optimistic, because of the seriousness of that fly mess down there in central Mexico,
right?
And really no flies going down there to speak of. Statistically, no flies going down there. That one is going to get bigger. We just can't. There's too many places to cover, and so our priority with our flies is to protect the Texas border first, and to drive that little area back where it is now, and then deal with the big mama. Because here's the thing. We can't be satisfied with stopping the flies in Mexico. We tried that before.
Yeah.
Mexico is too big and too wide. We have to drive them all the way through Central America and back beyond Panama again. So believe me, we'll need every one of those flies. I think we're going to need the flies in the U.S. Because I'm just afraid that this. We got a nice, warm, humid summer.
Right.
Spring started already now, and that worries me. So that's what I think, Herman. I think we're going to need them.
All right, now, okay, we're about out of time. We got one more little thing. Okay, okay.
Sure, go ahead.
It's okay. You said Ivomec, and the first thing everybody's going, oh well, hell, Ivomec takes care of them. Ivomec will prevent the flies from maybe bothering the livestock. It's not. You didn't mean Ivomec cures the whole problem. I mean, you put.
Here's what I meant.
Yeah.
The only thing that's going to eradicate this fly is sterile flies.
Yeah.
We're talking about management. Ivermectin does not. The fly is harmless, other than it lays eggs.
Yeah.
What ivermectin does. And it doesn't do any good to spray the cattle or anything. The flies don't pay attention to that. The flies are going after a wound. So the treatment is after larvae are in a wound already, or the larvae have. And we talked last time. It doesn't make a wound. They can get in their eyes and their nose sometimes even. Right. But the ivermectin will kill the larvae that are in the animal, and the residue of ivermectin in this. Now we're talking injectable now. Don't confuse. The pour-on, from a veterinarian perspective, I will tell you this: I think that pour-on ivermectin in any application is half as effective as injectable, and that's the same for Dectomax. That's the same for Dectomax. So injectable, Dectomax, ivermectin, the other products, 2 weeks. They will treat the larvae that are in there and prevent them for 2 weeks. Which, when we used to smear baby calf navels, if you're having calves born in the warm season, now. Honestly, you probably could still treat the navels if we had worms in the area. But an injection of ivermectin to a newborn baby calf might be the trick, and for 2 weeks. So that's kind of what I meant by the treatment.
All right. Okay, Greg, we're out of time, but I sure appreciate you visiting with us this morning. All right. Folks, I hope you got...
Herman, I always enjoy it.
Oh, you bet. Hang on just a minute. All right, folks, I hope y'all enjoyed this. I got a little information, get a little better understanding of what's going on. And this week's edition was also brought to us by Shaw's Bend Social Club, country club folks who don't have a country club. Now, y'all go out, have a big weekend, have lots of fun, be safe, and y'all just remember pretty much any day is sure a good day to be out in the woods.